Hey, my name's Ben Cashin, and really excited to jump in with Merge again this semester. My wife and I, Louise, who will introduce you to our family in a moment, have been teaching this class in Merge for 7 or 8 semesters now. I can't remember how many, but it's something that we really, truly love to do. We're honored to be a part of it and excited to talk about conflict and communication with you all tonight. I hope whatever home you're in tonight and the group of people that you're with, that you're feeling just a lot of enrichment through the Merge material, and that you're learning a lot and finding things that you can put into practice during this seriously dating or premarital season. And with that, I'm going to let Louise take a minute and just introduce our family real quick.
I'm Louise. Ben and I have been married for 15 years.
It's a long
15
time.
years. We have 3 kids, 9, 7, and 4. So our topic tonight, conflict and communication. We have a lot of that, not just with one another, but with our family. So it's pretty constant. So we've kind of been forced to practice that a lot and get better at it. So we hope that our words tonight kind of give you a little insight and help as you move forward in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. We're thrilled to do this. We love Merge. We've been going to fellowship for a long time and think that Merge is just such an awesome ministry and are so glad that you're plugged into that. So as we jump in, session 2, communication and conflict, something that is near and dear to our hearts, both in our personal story, but also in my professional journey. So in a previous professional life, I was a licensed marriage and family therapist, and really saw the importance of communication, but even more so saw the importance of conflict. And one of the things that I just saw over time that was an overwhelming predictor in couple success was their ability to do healthy conflict. Unhealthy conflict really just strips down a relationship over time, and healthy conflict has this way of making deposits that add strength and muscle over time. One of the things that we like to do as we jump into communication and conflict with the Merge class is we like to show a video. So you're going to see a video for the next few minutes. It's one of my favorite videos. Some of you have probably seen it. It's called The Backwards Bicycle. And so we're going to watch that for just a couple of minutes. But I want you to watch it tonight through the lens of conflict and communication, and how things might have to change as you enter into this new relationship moving forward. So check out the video, and we'll be back in a minute.
Hey, it's me, Destin. Welcome back to Smarter Every Day. You've heard people say it's just like riding a bike, meaning it's really easy and you can't forget how to do it, right? But I did something. That damaged my mind. It happened on the streets of Amsterdam, and I got really scared, honestly. I can't ride a bike like you can anymore. Before I show you the video of what happened, I need to tell you the backstory. Like many 6-year-olds with a MacGyver mullet, I learned how to ride a bike when I was really young. I had learned a life skill and I was really proud of it. Everything changed though when my friend Barney called me 25 years later. Where I work, the welders are geniuses and they like to play jokes on the engineers. He had a challenge for me. He had built a special bicycle and he wanted me to try to ride it. He had only changed one thing. When you turn the handlebar to the left, the wheel goes to the right. When you turn it to the right, the wheel goes to the left. I thought this would be easy, so I hopped on the bike ready to demonstrate how quickly I could conquer this.
And here he is, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Destin Sandlin. First attempt riding the bicycle.
All right. So the faster I go, the better. Yeah.
I couldn't do it. You can see that I'm laughing, but I'm actually really frustrated. In this moment, I had a really deep revelation. My thinking was in a rut. This bike revealed a very deep truth to me. I had the knowledge of how to operate the bike, but I did not have the understanding. Therefore, knowledge is not understanding. Look, I know what you're probably thinking. Destin's probably just an uncoordinated engineer and can't do it. But that's not the case at all. The algorithm that's associated with riding a bike in your brain is just that complicated. Think about it. Downwards force on the pedals, leaning your whole body, pulling and pushing the handlebars, gyroscopic precession in the wheels. Every single force is part of this algorithm. And if you change any one part, it affects the entire control system. I do not make definitive statements that often, but I'm telling you right now, you cannot ride this bicycle. You might think you can, but you can't. I know this because I'm often asked to speak at universities and conferences, and I take the bike with me. It's always the same. People think they're going to try some trick or they're just going to power through it. It doesn't work. Your brain cannot handle this. For instance, this guy, I offered him $200 just to ride this bike 10 feet across the stage. Everybody thought he could do it.
No, you didn't understand. You didn't understand. So, this way. Okay. All right, just a second. All right, so, whenever you're ready. Yeah. Wait. No, you have to keep your feet on. Dude, all right, here we go. Wait. Like, you gotta start rolling at least. Ready? Go. And go. Oh, go! All right, back up. Okay, wait. Keep your feet on the pedal. Go. Go right on. Just keep your feet on the pedals. Hands on. Yeah, come on. All right, one more time.
Once you have a rigid way of thinking in your head, sometimes you cannot change that, even if you want to. So here's what I did. It was a personal challenge. I stayed out here in this driveway and I practiced about 5 minutes every day. My neighbors made fun of me. I had many wrecks, but after 8 months, this happened. One day I couldn't ride the bike and the next day I could. It was like I could feel some kind of pathway in my brain that was now unlocked. It was really weird though. It's like there's this trail in my brain, but if I wasn't paying close enough attention to it, my brain would easily lose that neural path and jump back onto the old road it was more familiar with. Any small distractions at all, like a cell phone ringing in my pocket, would instantly throw my brain back to the old control algorithm and I would wreck. But at least I could ride it. My son is the closest person to me genetically, and he's been riding a normal bike for 3 years. That's over half his life. I wanted to know how long it would take him to learn how to ride a backwards bike, so I told him if he learned how to ride a backwards bike, he could go with me to Australia and meet a real astronaut.
Are you gonna give up? No. Go ahead. This is how it starts. Look at this. This is such a big deal. Get up, you got it. Did you see his brain get it? So he, in how many weeks have we been doing this? 2 weeks? In 2 weeks, he did something that took me 8 months to do, which demonstrates that a child has more neuroplasticity, am I even saying that right, than an adult.
It's clear from this experiment that children have a much more plastic brain than adults. That's why the best time to learn a language is when you're a young child. All right, today's bike log. I can ride smooth, I can ride fast. I'm thinking the experiment is over.
Okay, now I'm in Amsterdam, a city that has more bicycles than people. The question is, can I ride a normal bike now? I mean, I've spent all this time unlearning how to ride a bike. If I go back and try to ride a normal one, will my brain mess up? So I've tweeted a Smarter Everyday meetup, if you will, and I'm gonna see if somebody brings a bicycle and I'm gonna try to ride a normal bike. It's backwards, it's backwards.
This was one of the most frustrating moments of my life. I had ridden a normal bike since I was 6, but in this moment, I couldn't do it anymore. I had set out to prove that I could free my brain from a cognitive bias. But at this point, I'm pretty sure that all I proved is that I could only redesignate that bias.
So what you're not seeing is just a group of people here looking at me, looking at the strange American that can't ride a bike because they think I'm dumb. But I'm actually 2 levels deep into this because I've learned and unlearned. All right.
After 20 minutes of making a fool out of myself, suddenly my brain clicked back into the old algorithm. I can't explain it, but it happened in a very specific moment.
I got it. I'm back. Oh, it clicked. Hold on, it clicked. I got it. Okay, there it is. There was the moment. Okay, I can ride a bike.
I tried to explain this to the people around me, and they just didn't get it. They thought I was faking the previous 20 minutes, and I couldn't get anybody to believe me.
That looked like I faked that, didn't it?
Yeah.
Just a fake. You think I'm faking. You don't believe me.
That's so weird. You were like, la la la, and it's full.
You think I'm lying, don't you? I'm not lying.
I felt like the only person on the planet who had ever unlearned how to ride a bike, and I couldn't articulate it to anyone because everybody just knew that you can't forget how to ride a bike. So I learned 3 things from this experiment. I learned that welders are often smarter than engineers. I learned that knowledge does not equal understanding. And I learned that truth is truth, no matter what I think about it. So be very careful how you interpret things because you're looking at the world with a bias, whether you think you are or not.
All right, hope you enjoyed the video. The backwards bicycle, such a fascinating video on a lot of levels, and it applies in a lot of different ways. Normally, if we were all in this great big room together, we would do some process time, and I would stand up here awkwardly for a long time while I asked people to answer questions about what they learned in the video. You guys wouldn't answer, you'd be overly quiet and just sit there. But we'll skip that for tonight, and I'm going to tell you a couple of things through the lens of relationship, communication, and conflict that stand out to me in that video. Number one, it is incredibly hard to unlearn things from your past. You're entering into a new relationship with another person that grew up in a different home, with a different way of doing communication and a different way of doing conflict. Louise's home and my home growing up were very different in a lot of ways. And so we had to unlearn the communication and conflict things that we brought into our marriage and relearn something new, just as he had to relearn how to ride a bicycle. Things that feel so elementary but are so hard to undo our current thinking and latch on to some new thinking. The second thing, kind of a smaller one that I love about that video is, I love when he says the slightest distraction distraction could take his mind away from what he learned new and could cause him to wreck on the bike, right? He talked about if my cell phone rings in my pocket, I'll lose the new way of thinking and I'll go back to the old ways and I'll crash. The same thing's true in communication and conflict. Just when you think you're getting it and you're learning to do a new way of conflict together in this new relationship, you get distracted and you revert back to your old ways. And it's really hard to stay on the path and move forward. So that's two things that I love about that video, and I hope you enjoyed it and can continue to think about the video through the lens of conflict and communication. So conflict, common conflict and communication mistakes. We're going to talk about 10 mistakes tonight. So these are things that you don't want to do, and we'll cover obviously the flip side of that, which is 10 things that you can do. But one of the big ideas that you're going to hear us talking about is that conflict breeds intimacy, and intimacy breeds conflict. You cannot have one without the other in the context of your marriage going forward. Your emotional, your spiritual, your physical intimacy depend upon the ability to learn to do conflict well. Whatever traction you have there right now, you will lose over time if you can't figure out how to do conflict well within the relationship that you're entering into. So we're going to talk about that a lot tonight. Let's jump straight into mistake number one. Mistake number one, believe the goal of communication is to make sure that you are heard. This is such a common thing that we see in relationships, in therapy, that I see now in business conversations. People enter into conflict and their number one goal is, I want people to hear me. One of the things that is really incredible to me is people on social media who think they can change somebody else's opinion about a political agenda over social media. It's not going to happen. All you're trying to do is make yourself feel heard, and if that's the point of the conflict that you're going into with your spouse or significant other, it's not going to work. In Proverbs 18:2, we learn, a fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion. The goal instead is mutual understanding. It is more important for me to make her feel heard than it is for me to be heard. That is such a hard mental shift that I have to force myself into every day. It is more important that she knows that I understand her perspective than it is that I can get my voice out to her. The goal has to be mutual understanding, and it takes really, really hard work. Mistake number two.
Okay, mistake number two, not understanding the impact of your words and tone. So this was a struggle early on in our marriage, just as much as the one Ben just talked about wanting to be heard. So I feel like maybe we experienced this early on in marriage when we didn't know how to conflict very well. But this is, I like to say this is more like what you hear. It's not about what you said, it's how you said it. And I know that sounds really simple, but there's so much truth behind that. So early on, Ben, I kind of associated him with an authority figure, which I'm so sorry.
Not great. Not great.
But again, that goes back to my home environment where I grew up, having a dad who was very much an authority figure and authoritative and dominant in conflict. And so instantly when he would kind of turn that on, I would kind of throw my hands up in the air, get really defensive, and just withdraw hardcore because of how he was saying it. I wasn't even listening to his words or what he was trying to say because I was too turned off by how he was saying it. So I didn't view it so much as a partnership between us. It was more of like, you're in control of me right now and I don't like the way that makes me feel, so I'm gonna shut down. I'm gonna put my walls up and we're done. But now as we work through a lot of stuff, now I can see and understand that he's for me, he's for us, we're on the same team, and he is trying to make the best decisions and be the most productive we can together. But we had to understand each other first, and I had to know and trust him that he was coming from a good place where I could trust him and know that he had our best intentions at heart and not selfishly his own. And so when one person starts to do that, it creates this like positive feedback loop. I'm like, oh, well, you know, he's listening and his words are gentle, and I in turn return that, and it just becomes a more peaceful, respectful, productive conversation. So that one goes a long way. It's a simple one, it's a little one, but the payoff in the end is so much greater. So
Yeah,
big
it's
one.
really good, Louise. And I mean, so here's how this played out early in our marriage. You know, Louise would present like, I had this awful thing at work today, and this person did this thing, and I'm so mad, and I'm so hurt, and well, I'm like, well, then you just need to do this and this and this, and it'll get better. And I'm giving advice that I think is actually really helpful, and she's looking at me and shutting down. Now, you can imagine, for me, I was like, why is she shutting down? I'm trying to help her. What I had no perspective to is that I was talking at her in a way that felt to her like I was being authoritative. My tone was all wrong. The way that I was using my words was all wrong. I wasn't really listening. I was just prescribing, and that's not what I'm called to do as her husband.
And I was at fault as well. This was not just Ben, using a harsh tone with me. I would be passive aggressive and really just snippy in my comments back to him. So I was not the victim there. I mean, it went both ways.
Yeah, I would say it was mostly her fault. It's really hard when I make jokes in here because there's nobody in here now. So it's going to get awkward every now and then. Thanks. Okay, Proverbs 18:21 says, death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruits. So here was the takeaway that I needed so bad early in our marriage, and Louise did too. We could tell other examples. But what you say and how you say it matters. And I got to be honest with you, I wish that weren't true. I wish that it could just be this, we're done. But that's not the way that God created us as human beings in the context of relationships. What we say and how we say it matters. If you don't think that how you say things matters, if you find yourself saying things like, that's just how I am, or that's just how I say it, you need to check your spirit, specifically right now in the context of merge and coming together in a serious relationship. How you say things matters, and it will flesh itself out in the context of this close relationship. Mistake number 3, don't recognize any of your negative communication patterns. This is a wonderful thing to do if you'd like to be miserable for the next 40 to 50 years in your relationship. Let's talk about a few of the negative communication patterns that we're going to look at tonight. Number 1, withdrawing, an unwillingness to stay in important conversations. It's going to get a little more intense here for a second. Number 2, escalation, negative responses to another that create a snowball effect that lead to increased hostility and negativity. Number 3, negative interpretation, believing that the motive of the other person to be more negative than it really is the case. And number 4, invalidation, subtle, indirect put-downs of the thoughts, feelings, or character of another. Spoiler alert, you do one of these 4. One of these 4 is something that you're going to do right now. And actually, we do this when we're in the room together, and we're going to do it again tonight, even though we're virtual. So here's what I want you to do. Check that list. Which one of the 4 are you? And we're going to go through, and I want you to actually raise your hand in the room that you're in right now. I want you to raise your hand when I get to yours so that we can all see what you might struggle with from a negative communication pattern. Louise, this goes for you too, and it goes for me too. So we're actually going to raise our hand when we get to ours, and you're not going to have to wait all that long to get to yours. Number 1, I want all my withdrawers in the room to raise your hand. Unwillingness to stay in an important conversation. There it is. It's low, but it's there, I promise. All right, hands down, thanks withdrawers. I know you hated that. Next, where are my escalators? People that just love to pour a little gasoline on the fire. Raise your hand. That's right. Thank you. Number 3, negative interpretation. Who is always thinking that person's just out to get me and things, their intentions are worse than they appear? Okay? And then number 4, and this is me, invalidation. Subtle, indirect put-downs of the thoughts, feelings, or character of another. That's me. You've got to have some perspective to the things that you do that are pattern, that are going to show up over and over again in the course of your relationship, so that you can work against those. That blind spot will haunt you over time otherwise. Another way that we like to look at the negative communication patterns is in the roles of conflict through the idea of pursuing and withdrawing. And so I'm going to touch on this for just a second, but this is something that Louise and I learned a ton about in our own marriage therapy. Just understanding in conflict who is the pursuer and who is the withdrawer. So this is not throughout every moment of your life. This is what you do when you're in conflict with one another. The pursuer wants resolution in conflict, and space feels threatening. They want to close the gap. They want to finish the argument. They want to settle the fight. Let's end things because the space feels threatening. The withdrawer wants conflict to end, and space feels protective. Space says, I can make sure that I'm okay so that this doesn't get worse than it is. Or I'm going to create space here that allows for some nuclear missile to not be shot so that the relationship can survive this fight. What's so important in understanding this pursue-withdrawal dynamic, and by the way, I'm the pursuer in conflict and Louise is the withdrawer in conflict. What's so important to understand is that we pursuers, we've got to take a step back, take a deep breath, realize that we are loved and cherished by a holy God, and that a little bit of space here is not as threatening as it feels, and we've got to slow our roll down. It's so critical. Pursuer right now, you know it, you're sitting there, you're thinking about it, you're the pursuer in conflict. Slow down in conflict. Allow a little bit of space. Everything will be okay. The God of the universe is bigger than the fight that you're in right now. To my withdrawers out there, including my sweet wife right here, you've got to summon a little more courage. Hang in there a little bit longer. Engage in that hard conversation a little bit longer. Be honest with the pursuer. Hey, I'm struggling and I feel like I want to run from this fight, but I know it's important that I hang in and I'm trying to hang in. Find that courage, summon that courage, and hang in those hard conversations a little more. Mistake number 4.
Before we go on, I know a lot of times you speak to like recognizing who's the withdrawer, who's the pursuer, but sometimes it can be both. Like 2 withdrawers, 2 pursuers. So what would you say, like if there's 2 pursuers, 2 withdrawers?
Yeah, so it definitely can happen. It's rare. Pretty obviously the 2 pursuer relationship is going to be really, really explosive. And the 2 withdrawer relationship has a chance of really losing the energy that continues to give life into the relationship. And so it would actually be nice if over time one of them could slide into the other role, but it remains the same. If you're the pursuer, even if you're in a dual pursuer relationship, you've got to slow down. You've got to take deep breaths. You've got to tell yourself you're okay. And if you're in a relationship with 2 withdrawers, you both need more courage. You both need to hang in there longer. You both need to try to have good, healthy conflict. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I will say, with Ben being the pursuer, I know when he stops pursuing, that's when I get really anxious. Like, this is bad. He stops trying to close that gap, and that means I really have to summon the courage to step into that space and try to close that gap and make sure we're okay, which is hard for both of us because as someone who does, is always coming when he takes a step back, I'm kind of like, something's terribly wrong.
Those are the really fun fights.
Yeah.
Not actually.
Buckle up. All right, mistake number 4, assume you are healthy because you don't fight. I'm very guilty of this one. I know I speak a lot of early on in our marriage, so clearly we were real healthy early on, but this is a big misconception that I bought into and I believed. We never fought. We were always okay. And I never questioned it. I was like, we must have a really great, healthy marriage. We don't ever fight. We get along. We have fun together. But now I can see that is not sustainable. And I always say that this has an expiration date. It's full of deceit. It cannot last. And it will show up in crisis. So if you get to that point, you need to start asking yourself, okay, what is going on in my heart, in my spirit, in our relationship? You just need to get curious and start asking those hard questions underneath the surface that normally you wouldn't dig deep into because there's nothing big going on at the moment. But just because you're even keel right now and all the time, like that's actually not a great indicator of the health of your marriage. Most likely someone is numbing out or just doesn't care. So fighting is good, and I'm not saying, to go pick a fight, but just get curious about what's really going on in your marriage. And so growing up, healthy conflict was not modeled in my home, and it was either completely avoidant or completely explosive. And so that middle ground, I just didn't know how to do. And I know Ben talked early on about family of origin. So that's where I came from. He came from a different household, and trying to unlearn those patterns and establish a new one between the two of us just took a lot of work. And it wasn't until we hit crisis a few years ago that we really had to evaluate how we handled conflict and rough patches in our marriage. So we kind of had to come to a decision where we had to make a call of, we need to get this together and get it right, or our marriage and our family is going to suffer because of it. So it was something that, forced our hand a little bit to really dig into counseling and to evaluate our marriage, because there was no working around it. We couldn't kind of hide from it anymore. I think I felt safe without conflict. It kept me from being vulnerable instead of seeing conflict as an opportunity. And as we stated at the very beginning, conflict breeds intimacy, and intimacy breeds conflict. So you can imagine, without one or the other, you fall flat. Like there's just this dead space. We were numb, we were stagnant, not going anywhere. And we're about 10 years in, and it can, I'm sure it can happen earlier or later in your marriage. And honestly, I'm surprised that we were able to sustain our patterns for as long as we did. But now I'm so thankful that something happened to open our eyes and wake us up a little bit, to set us on the right course. So, and just if you ignore conflict, there's bitterness, there's resentment. It comes out sideways in ways you don't want it to. So don't avoid conflict in the name of peace. It's paradoxical. You think no conflict, peace, but that's not the case. So bottom line, conflict is good. There's healthy conflict, and figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah, don't miss the wisdom of my wife. She said, having no conflict has an expiration date. It will not, that pattern will not maintain. One of two things will happen. Either either the relationship will just end or something really hard will happen. No conflict has an expiration date. It's a really, there's a lot of wisdom in that. What we know is conflict is an opportunity in relationships. We've got to see conflict as an opportunity in our relationships. Conflict breeds intimacy. Intimacy breeds conflict. Learning how to have healthy conflict over time is, if you don't hear anything else that we say tonight, learning to fight well is the money stuff of relationships. And when we can combine that with the gospel of Jesus, that's when we really find the magic of marriage. And so I want to really encourage you to dig into that as a couple tonight.
Because I think if you can do that well, if you can communicate well and go into conflict well, all those other big issues that come up, whether it be finances or in-laws or what have you, you can get through those. So this is a good foundational place to start, which I wish we would have known this or had some clue about it early on. But
Yeah, for sure.
better now than never.
Better now than never, for sure. Okay, mistake number 5. Assume conflict ends when you say, I'm sorry. Folks, a lot of times when I say I'm sorry to her, we're just getting started. So know that it's not over at that moment. The blanks that you'll fill in on the next page, ask for forgiveness and know that forgiveness is ongoing and active. I could go on a really long tangent on the next thing that I'm about to say, but I'll try to keep it kind of short. As a culture in America, we suck at asking for forgiveness. We are terrible at it. We're horrible at it. A lot of times, our apologies are more accusatory than they are an apology. We say, I'm sorry that what I did made you feel like that. I'm sorry that when I yelled, you felt sad. That is demeaning and degrading to the other person's experience, not a true apology. We lack as a culture the vulnerability to look at somebody else and go, I'm sorry for what I did to you. I shouldn't have done that. How can I make it right? A long time ago, there was this speech that kind of went viral. This was like early on when things could go viral, like 2007 or something. I don't even know if viral was a thing back then, but it was on the internet and I saw it, so it was viral. Called The Last Lecture, and it was this professor, he was at a university in the Northeast, and there was a tradition that before you retired, you got to give your last lecture, and a bunch of people would come and see it. Well, this professor was not retiring, he had terminal cancer, and he was about to pass away, and so he was giving, before he got too sick to continue to teach, he was giving his last lecture, and it was really powerful. But one of the things that he focused on was how terrible we are at apologies. And I'll never forget what he said about a great apology. He said a great apology has 3 parts. I'm sorry, it's my fault, how can I make it right? That is the antithesis of I'm sorry that what I did made you feel sad. This is accepting full responsibility. I'm sorry, it was my fault. I'm not going to give excuses because they don't matter. How can I make it right? This is an unbelievable life skill that we miss all the time. I actually literally today, the day that we're recording this, not the day that you're watching it, today had somebody at work, there was a mistake that happened over the weekend, we got it fixed and we went to find out what happened, and I got an email back from somebody at my office that said, hey, this was my fault, I own it fully, I'm so sorry, what can I do to make it right? I can't tell you how that impacts the way that I view that person. Their full ownership of the mistake. If over the course of your marriage, all they feel is, well, I'm sorry that you're sad, I don't know what to do. That is the path to destruction in your relationship. Versus, and we don't get this right all the time.
No, we're actually really bad at this. I'm bad at this.
But over time, if you can say, hey, I'm sorry, this is on me, it's my fault, what can I do to make it right? Because I acknowledge that what I did there was wrong. Is very, it's very powerful. And we're going to talk about this later.
So we see this in our kids already. They can say, I'm sorry to one another, but it's the, what can I do to fix this, or what can I do to help make this better, that they struggle with so much. Like, they can't do it because that admits ownership and responsibility of hurting the other person. So they'll just dance around that all day long. And I'm like, no, like, say, I hurt you, I'm sorry for X, Y, Z, how can I help make this better? And that is immensely more difficult than just saying, I'm sorry. So even at that young age, it's just such a perfect picture of the natural struggle it is for all of us, not just in a marital relationship, but just as a sinful human.
Yeah.
But that one, yeah, it's just, that one's a hard one.
No
We
doubt.
all have our spots, and
No doubt.
that one's difficult.
So what I want you to do right now is just sitting there, watching this video in a group of people that you're just getting to know. I want you to take a deep breath and do a little bit of a spirit check. How are you at apologizing? Are you able to look at somebody and go, hey, I'm sorry, that was my fault. It's on me. What can I do to make it right? Is that something that you can do or have done? Is that somewhere where you need to grow? Check your spirit right now. If it's not, that's okay. That's why we're here. But you need to get in the game. You need to get in the game. If you're going to enter into the most challenging human relationship in the history of the world, not just our marriage, but marriage in general, you've got to be able to apologize. You are coming into this relationship as a sinner with a sinner. And in the intimacy that exists right here, you will sin against one another. It will be required of you to be able to apologize and apologize well. And if you're unwilling or unable, I think you need to take a hard look at the relationship that you're in right now and the decisions that you're about to make about a covenant before God and with each other. Apologies are unbelievably important. Let's turn to the scriptures, Colossians 3, 12 and 13. Put on then as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience, bearing with one another, and if one has a complaint against another, forgiving each other as the Lord has forgiven you, so you must also forgive. It's not just about me apologizing to Louise. It's about her forgiving me. We have no right as sinners saved by the grace of the one true and holy God and His Son Jesus to deny forgiveness to each other in the context of this relationship. We are called to do it. The Scripture said it right there. It's not a suggestion, it's a commandment to forgive one another. It's hard to do. It's not easy to do. That doesn't mean that you allow people to walk over you, but it does mean that you forgive them. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. You're going to see a Tim Keller slide on the next quote, or on the next slide, a quote from him. I want you to read that before you break into your discussion questions, and then you're going to be in your discussion questions for a little bit, and once you're done, we're going to come back together for the second half. Dig into these discussion questions. There's some rich material there, and I hope that that as a couple, you and your significant other are grappling with these questions well, thinking about the patterns that you have, thinking about whether you're pursue or withdraw, or thinking about how you apologize, and grapple with that stuff during the question time. And then we'll come back together for mistakes 6 through 10 in a few minutes. Thanks, and see you in just a bit.